It is. That'll get me there.
You can do everything else the night before. You can't do that.
Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to get started here. We went from good morning to good afternoon, just like that. We passed the noontime here on this first day of May, if you can believe it. We are a third of the way through 2024. Good afternoon again, everyone. Once again, welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Again, if it's your first time here, we're so glad you're here with us. And if it's not your first time, welcome back. Good to have you here. CMC explores public policy issues, current events, and lessons in leadership at forums just like this one each and every week. I am Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor with NBC4 Today and a proud board member of the CMC Board of Trustees. And for those of you joining us by live stream, welcome as well. We're coming to you from our home here in Columbus's historic Italian village, the Ellis. As mentioned by Sophia, if you scan those QR codes, you get much more information about how to get involved with CMC. You can read bios of today's panelists. You can take a short survey and see the many organizations that sponsor your not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Speaking of sponsors, we have a lot of them today. We want to thank you all so much. We are grateful to Advanced Drainage Systems, GBQ, the Grange Insurance Audubon Center, Rumpke Waste and Recycling, Swaco, and the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation. And then we're also grateful to the COSI Science Festival and to our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And of course, thank you to the Ellis for once again hosting us. So it really takes a village to put one of these forums together. So let's give a big round of applause to all of our sponsors today. And we're so excited about today's forum, too, because it's the start of what is going to be a fun 4 days, hopefully, here in the city and, frankly, Central Ohio with the COSI Science Festival. And today's forum is called Green is the New Growth, Central Ohio's Sustainable Future. So today's forum is intended to help highlight the role that science, scientific thinking, and great entrepreneurship are playing in Central Ohio every day and all around us. But first, to introduce our esteemed panelists, we're going to welcome in Joe Lombardi, Executive Director of today's sponsor, Swaco. Joe?
Thank you, Matt. And good afternoon, everyone. What a beautiful place and a beautiful day to have this event. I want to thank Sophia and CMC for hosting this event today, and Swaco is one of the proud sponsors of the event today. As a solid waste district in Franklin County and the owner and operator of Franklin County Landfill, we see a lot of valuable material come to our doorsteps every day. In fact, it may surprise you to know that not only do we receive over 1 million tons annually, 76% of what comes into our landfill could have been reused, recycled, or composted before it was thrown away. These items, cardboard boxes, plastic bottles, glass jars, and even food scraps are valuable. You're going to hear from our panelists today about the value these materials bring to each of their businesses, the benefits of a circular economy, and why it's important to divert these materials from our landfills. You've probably all seen the national headlines that recycling is a false narrative and that recyclables are simply being landfilled. Well, I'm here to tell you today that is not the case. You will learn that not only do nearly all the recyclables collected in Central Ohio go on to become new products in the United States and the Midwest, but the majority stay right here in Ohio. Central Ohio is home to hundreds of businesses who are recycling reliant, meaning they reuse, remanufacture, and create new products for the items we each recycle. Together, these businesses employ thousands of our neighbors and reinvest billions of dollars back into our local economy. Simply put, recycling means business here in Central Ohio. That is why, in addition to studying and quantifying the economic impacts of the industry, SWACO is focused on nurturing a circular economy by developing partnerships with recyclers, processors, and end users. As I travel the solid waste district, the state of Ohio, and even across the nation, I hear time and time again from recycling reliant businesses, we need more material. I challenge each of us in this room today to commit to recycling right by recycling all that you can. With the dedication of our residents, private and public partners, we can reduce our reliance on the landfill and create a sustainable future for our region. So let's get started. I am thrilled to welcome today's expert panelists and SWACO partners. Scott Barber, President and Chief Executive Officer of Advanced Drainage Systems. Alina Irwin, Professor of Environmental Economics at The Ohio State University Sustainability Institute. Tia Johnson, owner of Compost Clubhouse. Jeff Snyder, Director of Recycling, Rumpke Waste and Recycling. And our host, the one and only Trace T.C. Carter, Director of Creative Engagement for COSI. Trace, welcome to CMC, and we look forward to today's conversation. This podium is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a distinct honor. I want to give a special shout out to everyone watching online. Coming before you on behalf of COSI, I'm super honored. As mentioned, it's an amazing week for us. There will be 100+ experiences throughout this week to celebrate science. The Science Festival climaxes this Saturday at COSI. We're anticipating north of 35,000 people, and we made room for you. So if you'd like to experience that, make sure you attend there. We're also excited because if you did not know, your COSI is celebrating its 60th birthday this year. Can we make some noise for 6 decades of making science accessible? As our affectionate Dr. B says, he says, from the womb to the tomb, there's an experience for everyone. I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation today as one of the themes we talk about in our Science Festival is sustainability. So I want to go to first, Dr. Alina, you are our expert economist. Can you level set for the room, especially the non-experts? Give us a functional definition of a circular economy for this conversation.
Absolutely. So I'm an environmental economist. When I first started studying environmental economics, I had no idea that there was such a topic. And when I tell people, a lot of times they think it's an oxymoron. They think environment and economy are against each other. And of course, what we all know in this room and what we're trying to strive for with a circular economy is the economy and the environment are working together. And so the definition of a circular economy, I'll give you one that's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a really popular and really been very important organization that has really advanced the thinking on circular economy. And that is, there are 3 principles. One is no waste, no pollution. One is that we keep materials in constant circulation in the economy. And the other is that we use nature in ways that also regenerate nature. And so you can think of it as the opposite of a take, make, waste linear system. We are literally trying to close the loops by keeping materials in circulation, by not creating waste in the first place, not creating pollution, and regenerating nature.
Thank you for that. I want to go down to Jeff, right? Because there's that tension between, your company, the waste from others becomes the fuel for your business. So if you could just share one of Rumpke's recent initiatives that you think really underscored the importance of recycling or really just stood out in Central Ohio? Do you have an initiative for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, and thank you for having me. I think for Rumpke and for what we're trying to do is really threefold. We're trying to make it convenient and available to the public, right? So how many people in the room recycle today at your house? Oh my God, that's awesome. We love that, right? Right? So that's incredible, which we love that. So, but there's folks out there that don't have access to it, right? There's multifamily homes that are struggling with it. And some folks don't have curbside, but they have drop off, right? So they can go to drop off. Swaco's in the room. We have a ton of drop off that we move throughout the system, which is really important. So number one, we want to make it available. Number two, we want to build trust. As Joe pointed out in his comments, right, there's a lot of mistrust out there because of negative publicity out there in the marketplace about plastics. Plastics are bad. Single-use plastics need to go away. We don't want any more of that in the recycling stream. I'm here to tell you today, I want all of your number one plastic, which is all your bottles, right? I want all of your jugs, which is your number two plastic. Also, Scott wants those as well. And then I want all of your polypropylene, right? All of your tubs and those type of things, and your polypropylene cups as well. And we want all of it. Joe made a comment. 70% of the recycling that we want today still goes to the Swaco landfill here in Columbus. And we just got to stop that, right? We have the infrastructure. I will talk about that here in a few minutes, but we have the infrastructure to do that. And then lastly, the more that we can recycle, the lower the cost we can give to the public, right? So that's critically important. So accessibility, trust in recycling, which is part of education. And then thirdly, trying to lower the cost of recycling by the amount of recycling that we can do.
It's a very good answer. Thank you so much for that. I want to come to Tia because I very much appreciate your perspective in this conversation, being an entrepreneur, being behind the driver's seat of forming how your company does business. So one, can you provide context for what your organization does? But then two, from your standpoint, as you build out your business, what do you feel are the biggest needs from policymakers in order for an economy truly to become circular?
Okay. Well, that's a pretty heavy question. So I'm going to start with thank you for having me. My name is Tia Johnson. I am the owner of Compost Clubhouse. We are essentially acting as a hauler. So how he described he wants your plastic, I want your food. Changes that we can make. Let's see here. Policymakers, I think it really, for me, my most authentic answer could be bringing more people to the conversation. As I started this business, there was a clear gap in who is actually part of composting. And what we want to do is composting is for everyone. Remove the narrative that it's for a social class, remove the narrative that it's for this group of people. How can we bring more people to the conversation? And what does that look like with policy making?
Mm-hmm. No, that's very good. Thank you so much for that. As I'm thinking about recycling, just the entire process, just in a brief moment, you guys gave me some insights that were like, whoa. So I'd love to open this up primarily with this relationship that you two have. What are some of the misunderstandings within the community, within the recycling process overall? Some particularly those things that you think could help us get unstuck. It's not like, those who don't recycle haven't heard about doing it or the benefits, but what are some of those things, the misunderstandings that you think could get people unstuck?
So thank you for having me. It's always fun to be with Jeff and the Rumpke people because we do a lot of business with them. And I think one of the misunderstandings that we always kind of run into is kind of how little is recycled. That the recycling rates are not that high. I think we're stuck around 30% or something like that on the plastics. I think a lot of people raise their hands here and they just assume everyone does it. And there's a lot of awareness that needs to be driven. There's a lot of logistics and facilitation of bringing these things back to a place in an economic way that it can be processed and used. And I know when we explain that whole chain there and the impact that higher recycling rates could have on our business, on lowering your cost, on keeping things out of the landfill, people they go, aha, I get it now. I get it why this is important. It can have a good economic impact. So we tried to drive that awareness. We tried to drive that knowledge that the better recycling rates lead to better outcomes, and that we really are doing something with this. I mean, it is a misconception that this stuff is gathered at a curb and then not recycled or taken to a landfill. Does that never happen? I wouldn't say that, but I guarantee it happens very little, because that's part of our business model, is to be able to get that material from Jeff and then process it back into our products.
Yeah, so when everybody in this room makes a decision to put let's just use an example there, but a Tide bottle, okay? Everybody makes a decision that Tide bottle is empty, so you have a decision to make. You put it in your trash or you put it in your recycling bin. When it goes in the recycling bin, it ends up at our processing center right here in Columbus, right? So we're processing it and sorting it from everything else. We bale that material, and then we send it to ADS, who is the largest plastic recycler in the country, by the way, right here in Ohio. They're taking that and turning it back into a pipe. And I'm going to steal a little of your thunder, right? And I'll let you go with it here in a minute.
I'll finish the story, okay? So
turning it into something that's a durable good. And let's just talk about the timing of that. From the time you put it in the recycling bin to the time we collect it, sort it, bale it, and send it to somebody like ADS, that's about 7 days. Take it from there.
So we pick it up, we buy it from them, number 2s and number 3s. We'll take the polypropylene too, by the way. But anyway, he has it for 7. Kristen takes it, our general manager of our recycling business. She has it roughly for 30 days of inventory of recycled, either in its raw form or its processed form. And then we send it to a pipe plant. Findlay, Ohio would be one, London, Ohio, Worcester, Ohio. And there it's made into a black corrugated piece of pipe with a green stripe. Very important, the green stripes on there. You will see these at construction sites around the state. A lot going on here in Central Ohio. Right now we have about 90 days of inventory on hand. So from the time you put it in to it goes in the ground is probably about 127 days. That's pretty good. It'll go into the ground and it'll stay there 50 years. And we talk a lot about the circular economy, and we think that there are many aspects to that. One is something that goes round and round, and Jeff will touch it maybe 3 times, 4 times in its life. With us, when we take possession of that material and turn it into a pipe, it goes in the ground for 50 years, very useful, a durable good, one that is managing stormwater. That's a good thing. You don't like flooding in your neighborhood. You like to have your streets that are nice and dry after a heavy rain. You don't like basements that flood. So it's there, and it takes that material out of circulation for that period of time. Now, we also will go to some sites, and one that is going to be redeveloped, and there might be plastic pipe in there. We'll take that out. We'll reclaim that also and use it. We'll blend it with what we buy from Jeff. So there's quite a bit to it once we get a hold of it, right, Kristen? Yep. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to jump in and say that this is a great example of when the economics work, right? Because we've got the virgin materials are more expensive than the recycled materials. And that's exactly what we're going for in terms of making the economy and the environment work together. So often of the time, though, we don't have that. We don't have that. Virgin materials are actually cheaper than what it is to get the recycled materials. And that's largely often because the full cost of extracting, transporting, processing, making those virgin materials is not incorporated, and it's not reflected in the price, in the market price. It's what environmental economists call an externality. It is an outside the market cost that is borne by all of us, and in some cases, some people more than others, because of, for example, the pollution costs of producing, let's say, plastic from fossil fuels. And there's petrochemical companies that do this, that create all kinds of environmental pollution and burdens on nearby communities. There's the cost of transporting this and the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that are emitted into the atmosphere that are not priced into the products. And so if we were to get the prices right, and I'm an economist, so you have to excuse me for saying this, but if we were to get the prices right, the market for this would work in so many more cases.
So I would love to insert this question because I think you have a unique observation of that tension point of, the economies of just good business, but also environmental issues. So from your vantage point, when we think about the way businesses overall, this idea of a circular economy, the way we measure growth, dollars and cents, what are, from your vantage, ways that we can better measure success that account for environmental issues, but don't sacrifice the growth that companies love to see?
I love this question. All right, everyone get out your pencils because there's going to be a quiz at the end. Does everyone see one of these on their tables? I want to talk just for a moment about donut economics. Everybody loves donuts. Everyone likes to eat donuts. Everyone knows what a donut is. We're not talking about donut holes. We're talking about the full donut, the round thing that has a empty space in the middle.
For this conversation, we're going to call that the COSI Cheerio.
There you go.
Just for the record.
Perfect. And maybe that's like Ohio's special kind of donut. We'll talk about COSI Cheerios. Exactly. So the idea of a donut, what's donut economics? The idea is, imagine that we take all of our stuff, all of us, all of the stuff we consume, the places we live, our economy, and we are taking that and adding up all the environmental and earth resources that we need in order to produce that stuff. So what's the relevance of the donut? Think about a donut. It has two boundaries. It has an outer boundary, right? And so the outer boundary is an analogy for the ecosystem limits that we are naturally subjected to, right? We cannot take endlessly from the earth in terms of resources. There is not an endless supply of fossil fuels or of, certainly we are very well aware of the rare earth elements and the limitations of those, and even on renewable sources like fish and forests and wood, et cetera, right? We have to be careful of how those get regenerated. And so there's an ecological boundary that limits our consumption of resources. And that's what that outer donut is for, the outer boundary of the donut. But on the inner side, there is also a boundary in the sense that we do need to eat and we do need to live someplace and we do need to have an economy where we're building houses and we have cities and we have manufacturing and we have growth. And so that's what that inner boundary means, is that there's some amount of resources that we have to consume. But we want to make sure that we do that in equitable ways. So there's a social foundation there that is kind of a minimum floor. And then the outer boundary is an ecological ceiling. And so the trick is, how do we live inside the donut? And circular economy is it's not the only thing, but it's a huge thing for getting us to live inside the donut, right? Because we're reducing our reliance on virgin materials and extracting Earth's resources. We're figuring out how we can keep already used materials in the economy and keep reusing them. And we're reducing our reliance ultimately on the non-renewable stuff, right? As we transition to a renewable economy with renewable energy and regenerative agriculture and other kinds of practices.
Awesome. We're talking about being able to reuse. I want to come to you, Tia. We talk about the media and an amalgam of reasons why composting isn't adopted by a wider audience. So from your vantage point, why, or what are some of those challenges that you see? And then what is your organization doing to overcome that?
Okay. The why, education and exposure. I got into this business sort of blind, honestly. We were cleaning the trash cans for Compost Clubhouse, and it became one of those things where we eventually acquired it. Once I was in the industry, I felt very uncomfortable of like, wait, I'm not even composting. So now I had to go and fly this plane and build it at the same time. Once I was aware, it was one of those aha moments, especially we're taking our material to London right now to the correctional facility where the inmates are processing this and turn it into soil. And you get to see where it started, and then you get to put your hands in the soil. And it's like a kid moment when you get on a swing or go down a slide. I couldn't believe that I was so disconnected. And that's what I really genuinely felt is, here I am, an entrepreneur. I know that I'm solving problems essentially. How can I now bring more people to this conversation? It's fun over here. I don't have to be a tree hugger. No offense to the tree huggers. I don't have to be the expert. I just have to be knowledgeable enough to say, here's where we're at and here's where we're going. One of my favorite sayings is, you don't have to go to the moon for milk. Everything that I need right here has been provided to me. And I've been part of I'm gonna take, but I never realized how impactful it is to give. So how do we start to begin to educate people and expose people? At Compost Clubhouse, we start with the youth. That's really the core of our engagement. I call it the shoestring effect. Once you learn how to tie your shoes, you don't relearn that. It's a lifelong skill. So how can we start to make this part of the education experience? One of our clients, when the kids are at lunch, they have a landfill, they have a recycle, and they have a compost. And we're talking primary school age. They don't have to be taught to be part of the conversation. Actually, they're gonna be brilliant leaders as we build this out because they already know what challenges they're facing. Diversity. Honestly, there's not a lot of people that look like me that are composting. And it's like, okay, how can I maybe bring some people along to say, why aren't you doing this? What's the limitation? What's the barrier? What's stopping you? And the last would just be an inspiration. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I'm talking to young girls all the time about what you can be. It took me a lot of time to learn who I am and what value that I have. And now I can share that with this vehicle called Business Owner. As a business owner, I can show young girls it's possible you can do something different. It's possible that you can create your own value, and it's possible that you can have impact on your community and create legacy at the same time. I am a mother of 3, and my children are watching me go through this process of, Mom, when did you become the recycle police? Well, let me sit you down. So that's what we're doing at Compost Clubhouse.
Just right ahead, Mother's Day. I got to shout out mothers who are also setting the tempo, business leaders. I love the persona that you put out into the public. I want to come here with your presidential perspective, leading your organization. You have a purview, and ultimately, when we think circular economy in the context of recycling, it makes a ton of sense. But there's a lot of viewers in this room online who they're leading organizations, they're leading businesses where the philosophy of circular economy can be adopted. So if you were talking to other execs or leaders, what's some things that you've learned just philosophically of the circular economy that they could potentially apply to, their products and their goods to make them in just that circular aspect of business model there?
Okay, a lot to unpack in there. And, we were talking about it before that in many ways at Advanced Drainage Systems, we're kind of in this nice spot. The recycling piece is part of our business model, has been for many years. We're very vertically integrated in this. We really, it's a core to what we do. So we think about it as like that. It's just something we wake up every day and do at scale like no one in the world does. And it's economically beneficial. Finding the right economic model for this is not easy. And it took time to develop it. There's engineering, there's lots of material science behind it. So what I would tell people is you need to go and find where that economic lever is for you to begin to recycle, bring stuff in. And many people are talking, or many companies that manufacture are getting into this through life cycle analysis, which is kind of it's one of the ways to judge your donut, I think, and establish those boundaries. And the life cycle analysis basically says, through this manufacture, distribution, use of this product, how many resources is it consuming? And then there are policies in some places where the original manufacturer or someone in that chain has to take that back. So think if you have a washing machine, you've used its life. At the end of its life, it doesn't work anymore. You go get a new washing machine and you have to return that old one to Whirlpool. And then they have to break it down into its materials and find ways to reuse that again. That's part of a life cycle analysis. So many manufacturers are now getting into looking at this because of potential policy changes on producer responsibility, or we have customers that ask us, what is the life cycle and consumption of natural resources of your product through its whole thing? So, we don't have every customer ask us that, but we have enough that we spend quite a bit of engineering and thinking time about what that life cycle analysis is. So if someone asks me, how do you start thinking about the circular economy? I would say find the economic lever and then look at this life cycle analysis that you've got, and that will probably lead you to other ways to think about the potential economic levers.
That's really good. It's really good. So also, judge your donut, very brandable. I like that. You can go ahead and take that back to your space. That was a hit. Any other, just in your space? Oh, yeah. I was going to just piggyback on that. Anyone want to piggyback on that?
I just wanted to follow up on this and say that the life cycle analysis stuff is absolutely critical. At OSU, we have experts that do this kind of work. Some of you may have experts like this at your companies as well, but I'll just point to Daniel Gingrich, who's a professor here in the audience. Talk to him if you've got questions, because this is really good stuff. Daniel's training dozens of students in this every semester.
It's complicated.
It is complicated.
It's not, the first time they took me through one of them, I'm like, you guys are making this way too complicated. And it got even worse, the more we talked about it. But it's a real thing.
You quickly get to an understanding that the boundary you're working with is global, right? Because as you start thinking about where are the inputs for this product, they're coming from all over the place. And then you start thinking about, okay, what are the transportation costs? What are the impacts? We talk about, for example, embedded water or embedded carbon. That's literally the amount of either water it took all along that supply chain to produce that product, or the amount of carbon that was emitted all along that supply chain as the resources were extracted, transported, processed, etc. And when you start looking at it through that lens, the economics starts making a whole lot more sense. If you look at aluminum, for example, the energy costs of producing virgin aluminum versus from scrap, post-consumer scrap, is 95% savings in energy if you're using the post-consumer scrap, about 92% savings in reduction of carbon. So these are huge numbers.
And as you expand those boundaries is really what you're talking about along those supply chains. That's where these things like this come in, and it takes work. Like I said, it's not something we just sat down and did in 10 minutes. And you want to be right. You don't want to. You need to be right when you kind of go and do that analysis and present that to your customers or policymakers.
Piggyback on it. Got me? Okay, awesome. So for me, it is, again, that education exposure. If you haven't read the book Super Freakonomics, I'm telling you, it's a read, right? Like, it challenges your level of thinking of where you're at and then how it impacts the overall good. And just kind of to shout out to Rumpke, being in that environment, you guys taught me how to think better, think differently. You don't necessarily always, getting into business, you don't really always know how to solve the problem, right? I like when he kind of highlighted, find out where it's at. By being in this environment, I was able to look around and see what was going on in me and go, things that make you go, I was seeing the business model and how it worked and how could we incorporate something like that. It is something that I love and enjoy to be able to inspire to have a company of that size. So shout out.
Anything you want to add just from your perspective, Rumpke, to that leadership perspective, others adding that philosophy to their businesses?
Yeah, so we work very closely with brands. We work very closely with Procter & Gamble, some different people. Obviously, P&G is a Cincinnati-based company. We're a Cincinnati-based company as well. where our headquarters is. And so we work very closely with them with extended producer responsibility, as Scott kind of mentioned, with LCA's life cycle analysis and all that as well. So what's very important to them is that they can produce a product to get back into the recycling bin, to get back into a new product, right? So that's very, very important to them. And by 2030, P&G wants to have 100% recycled content in their packaging. That's a big goal, right? So for them to be able to do that, and they're not the only ones, you know, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, the list goes on about more and more people wanting to have post-consumer resin back into the packaging that we touch every single day. So extremely important on the EPR and holding brands responsible for making packaging that's recyclable.
It's really good. It's really good. One thing that was stated earlier that I noted, that some critics argue that recycling is not enough to address waste problems. I'm gonna open this up to anyone. How would you respond to the viewpoint that recycling might be diverting attention from more impactful solutions like reducing consumption? Anyone can, yep.
Yeah, it's a false dichotomy. I mean, it's not one or the other, it's all of the above. And we need all of the above, absolutely. So absolutely, yes, recycling's not enough, but recycling is essential. You know, if you think about how to scale, we're going to have to scale recycling in big ways if we're going to be producing and maintaining and making these markets consistent in terms of recycled materials. But we also, at the same time, have to think about the donut, come back to the donut in terms of the ecological boundaries and the social floors, and think about ways that we can, keep materials, reusing materials, keep them in the system so that we're not going back and extracting more, so that we're respecting those ecological boundaries, so that we're reducing our pollution and reducing our impacts on the environment. And also think about what is the goal? The goal is actually human well-being. The goal is not growth. The goal is well-being. And as we think about what that means, that starts to get at some other important metrics. To what extent are we able to continue supporting businesses and supporting people's livelihoods, but at the same time decouple our economy from that material basis? And we're never going to fully decouple, of course, because we'll always have to be using materials for our economy, but we think about kind of bending the curve downward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So it's CMC's long-standing tradition that we take questions from our audience in the room and also our audience online. So we'll be taking those questions in a few minutes. If you have a question in your in-room, feel free to make your way back to the microphone there. If you are online, feel free to share your question in the chat, and we have people there that will extract your question and look to get it in. So I just have one more question, and then we'll transition to that. We talk about scale. I've heard a few of you use that word, scale. One of you mentioned that there's about 30% or so people that recycle. Let's imagine that doubles. We're celebrating, wow, what methods from a recycling and composting perspective, when we think about scaling, methods that help scale effectively as it relates to new facility and just all that goes with doubling capacity or input?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take that one first. For those of you in the room that don't know, we are building the largest material recovery facility in North America right here in Franklin County. That facility will open up in 30 days. So when we talk about scale, that facility can handle 250,000 tons a year, or if you think about it, 1,000 tons a day of recycling. 63% of the recycling stream is fiber, right? When I say fiber, it's paper, it's corrugated, it's that type of material. 10% of that stream is plastic, all right? So we're gonna have the capability in this facility, not only to handle the growth of Columbus and Central Ohio, but to be able to expand it even farther than what anybody has ever done to this point. The other great thing about this facility is that we're adding more commodities, right? And I always talk about, we're looking at, let's just take one, for example, what about clamshells or thermoforms, right? Everybody buys strawberries and blueberries and all those things. That's not acceptable in the bin today. it will be in the future, right? We're going to have the technology in this facility to be able to sort materials that we've never been able to sort before, using AI, using near infrared optics, using ballistic separators, and all of this type of technology to be able to go deeper into the waste stream than we've ever been able to do before. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to make that material a higher quality. And I see the smiles with ADS. So we're going to make a higher quality material that we can go to market is. 80% of the material that you put in a recycling bin today in Ohio stays right here in Ohio. Phoenix Technologies, Evergreen Plastics, ADS, Axiom, every single milk jug you put in the recycling bin gets recycled right here in Columbus, right? And that's statewide, right? So that's just an incredible story that we can tell. And we want more of it. So as Columbus grows, as Central Ohio grows, and we all know it's growing, right? You're going to have a home for your recycling for a long, long time to come.
No, you talked about scale, and we talk about scale all the time. Rumpke is a scaled business. ADS, a scaled business. And what does that mean? It means that you have the capital, you have the human resources, you have the capability to go out and build $100 million facilities and engineer those with new technologies. We have the capability to take those materials, process them, turn them into pipe at very high volume every day all across the country. That's scale. And when you're not scaled, you often don't then have the resources to take those next steps in your technology evolution, investment in equipment, or investment in people. We're building a big engineering center here in town, and we had the wherewithal to do that, to hire 200 people, lots of engineers, test new things. That's how you kind of advance. Staying within the donut, I get it. That's hard, because there are really legitimate boundaries there, and you're trying to scale. She is in the process of scaling. That's really hard. That's what she's doing is much harder than what I do. Much, much, much harder, because you're, like you said, you're fighting for the resources. You're learning. You're building that plane as you fly, which is pretty amazing. At our companies, we kind of already know how to fly. We're just trying to get to different altitudes. So scale is important in these things, because unless you can get that scale, you can't get the cost. You can't get the development that goes with that to meet the economic goals, the market-based pricing type of goals that you were talking about. It all kind of works together like that. And scale is sometimes really hard to explain, but absolutely imperative to being successful in this particular game we're talking about of the recycling and circularity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any final remarks there before we shift?
Quick, there is a picture up on the screen of our facility. It's 226,000 square feet. Pretty impressive. Doesn't look like a material recovery facility when you drive up, right? So definitely looks like a place that you would want to come to work, and a place you would bring your recyclables. Unless you knew what was going on in this plant, when you see it from the road, you wouldn't know that, right? So very clean, everything's done inside. The technology that we've invested here is just bar none. So we're really excited about what we have going on there. The other thing that I'll mention just real quick is that if you're a city or municipality or a county and you have a recycling program, a lot of people like to know, like, how well am I doing? How much contamination do I have? What different commodities do I have in my stream, and what do those look like? We can bring your material into this facility and run your material in a separate part of the facility, and within an hour tell you exactly what your contamination is. So for the city of Columbus, if they want to say, we just made a great change in the city, can you tell us how we're doing? We can tell you how you're doing very quickly. And then 30 days from now, we can tell you again how you're doing, right? After those changes. So the technology we've invested in this plant is just really incredible. And I encourage you and you should all come and see it, because it's definitely something to be seen in the recycling industry.
So thank you all, very appreciative. Now I have Doug Buchanan with CMC curating questions from our live stream audience. If you are in the room in person and you have a question, feel free to make your way back to the microphone. So Doug, who do we have first, or what question we have first?
TC, thank you, and thank you to today's panelists. And if you do have a question, please do join me here at the microphone or type your question into the chat if you're watching on the live stream. Please do keep in mind that great questions at CMC have two things in common. They take less than 30 seconds to ask, and they end in a question mark. So here is our first question. This is one for Tia. What is your compost service area, and how do people participate?
Currently, we serve the city of Columbus in the Central Ohio area. We are helping with the city of Columbus drop-off locations. That's our primary. We also serve commercial properties as well, and that's simply going to our website and reaching out to us directly at compostclubhouse.com, where we'll be able to meet with you to discuss your options. So we're serving restaurants, we're serving schools, really focusing on a lot of the schools as part of our business model.
Well, first of all, thanks to the panel for the great discussion. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. My question is for Jeff. Jeff, I recently visited a MRF, a material recycling facility, and I felt really good about my recycling until I got there and I realized I was doing so many things wrong. And the question is twofold. One, is there a way to better educate people on recycling and what can go in, like film, the plastic bags can't go in? I was like, oh, I put everything in a plastic bag and put it in the blue bin. I'm doing it wrong. And the second part of the question is the new facility, will it kind of correct some of those ills, or will we have a little more leeway on the type of materials and the leniency of the materials that we put in?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the second part is that, well, the first part is that you can go to our website and you can see what our acceptables list is, but there is a ton of questions about, do I leave the cap on? Do I take the cap off? What about this particular product? What about this? Well, is this really a shape of a tub? And can I put it in? So there's I'm with you, right? I'm the director of recycling at Rumpke, and I still think about it every day, right? And like, can I put this in a recycling bin? So the new facility is going to allow us to go deeper into the stream, right? It's also going to have, on the third floor, an education center that we can have students come in, we can have the public come in, we can have adults come in, and it's going to walk you through from the time that you make a decision to buy a package of a consumer good at the grocery store, right? Is that a good decision or not? It's going to help you make that decision. And then it's going to walk you through the entire process of putting it in the recycling bin to the time we collect it, to the time we sort it, and the time we move it to market to make back into new products. It's going to walk you through that entire system. And then it's going to walk you through about how it's sorted. What does near infrared optics do? How does that tell the difference between a water bottle and a milk jug, right? So it's going to walk you through all of that. It's also going to tell you the tips and tricks of how to recycle. You know, some of the big struggles out there, as I said, is just what to do and how to prepare it. Do I wash it? Do I just put it in, right? How much food waste can you handle? So there's a lot of questions around that. And that's what our recycling center is going to fix and going to teach. And we're really excited to have students come in there, 10 years and older, to come in and really learn about recycling and be able to, right? They're going to go home and teach everybody else. So we're super excited about that. And we made a huge investment in this facility on education.
Thank you, everyone. Lee Martin with Lee Martin Architects asks, to what extent are building materials recycled at the present time, and will that practice grow as time passes?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't have those stats off the top of my head, but there's undoubtedly those that will have to grow over time, because the waste that's generated from buildings, if you think again about the embeddedness of the elements, including carbon in those buildings, is tremendous. So maybe Daniel Gingrich, who's at the microphone, knows the stats more than I do, but absolutely a critical sector for recycling.
On the spot with the stats.
I know. I was not expecting this. And as a civil engineer, I feel like I should know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I might actually want to defer to some of the people at Ohio State who deal with our construction, who might know more about the actual statistics. I certainly know that there are ways that we are thinking of construction materials. In particular, if we think about concrete and asphalt, there are ways that we can break those down and then use them as aggregate for lower quality applications, like using them to build roads with. I don't know the numbers for like steel rebar off the top of my head or other kind of building materials, but there are ways that we're thinking about them. Wood that's used for construction is used for energy in some places. That's not technically a recycling application, but it is a recovery. So there are ways that we're thinking more and more about how we incorporate these stocks materials into our ecosystem. Hopefully that helped to the question online. I was not expecting to be on the spot. Now is it my turn to ask a question? Excellent, great. So this question is probably more for Jeff, but anyone else on the panel can answer it. Time and time again, when we've tried to see circular economies be built, the big stumbling block has been trust and building connections and relationships between the companies that will make up the ecosystem. It seems that there is something special going on here and that Rumpke may be a key player in how we build trust. So I'm curious, how do you build and develop relationships with potential customers of your recycled goods?
With the people that we sell to?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of things go on. First of all, we have to make a quality product that they can make something back into, right? So critically important. We're not going to sell or move material from our recycling center into people that aren't going to turn it back into something useful or something that can be reused, right? Or so I'll give you a couple examples. So water bottles in Phoenix and in Clyde, Ohio, and in Bowling Green, Ohio, get turned back into water bottles, right? But the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take those thermoforms that everybody puts in a recycling bin that we say we don't want yet, all right? And they're going to take those and they're going to remove them from the clear water bottles or the clear bottles that we touch every day, right? Because they can't use that to make water bottles back out of, right? So it's all those type of things. The other thing that we do is we really vet the people that we move materials to. The other thing we do is we have multiple people that we sell to. It's a bad day when I got to tell you, Daniel, don't put your paper in the recycling bin because the paper mills that I sold to just went away. I have multiple paper mills that we sell to make sure that we can recycle fiber, right? So very, very important on that stream. So the trust that we build is you can put it in the bin every single day, right? Everybody talks about single-use plastics and them going away, and plastic bags are a bad thing, and all these things going on in the world, right? And you've seen the public or the media talk about all these things, and that's fine. But what are we going to do right now, right? What are we going to do today? And recycling is the answer to that. We have end users. We have people that want all of the 1s, 2s, and 5s plastics that we can possibly generate. And we can sell it to them all day long and move it to them all day long, and it's still not enough, right? The brands want more post-consumer resin in their products. It comes from the people that we sell to, that we move our material to, and it comes from our homes, right? So the more we can recycle, the more we can move through the system, the more we can get to these end users, and the more we can get to the brands to make new products with more recycled content. And that's the driver of recycling today.
Around building trust, any other aspects around building trust?
Well, I think we're on the right side of that. I mean, we have done a business with Rumpke for a long time. Andrew and I were introduced. We took a trip to see our recycling activities in the pipe plant, and I remember that trip when Andrew's like, "This is where it goes." You know, I think doing more of those kinds of things, driving those awareness, so you could see that full value chain that day. And now you have a completely different perspective, and it's like any commercial relationship you have. You know, you do stuff, you gain trust, and then you begin to work together, you know, in closer fashions.
And to that point, right, the openness to tell the public what happens to the material is critical, right? You can't just say, oh, it gets recycled, right? Because then people don't really trust that. They want names of where it goes, cities of where it goes, what it's made into, right? And that's what we provide. A lot of people like to keep that close to their heart in the recycling industry. I'm not one of those people. I tell people what we do with it, where it goes, right? Because if they can believe that and see it and Google it, then they know it's real.
Yeah. And that's interesting because we didn't talk about our recycling forever. I mean, we've been doing this for 30 years and we didn't talk about it. And I had a board member come up to me just when I started, said, you know, you manage water. That seems like a pretty unique thing, you know, stormwater, good thing. You're using all this recyclable material. There ought to be some story there that you're not telling. And so that developed, we called it the Band of the Willing. And now we got marketing people and all kinds of other stuff going on. We reached out to people like Rumpke, and that's built trust, I think, in the community, but also with our employees, our investors. In that story.
Awesome. Come right here. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say trust on the consumer side is also really important. And, there's, we talked a little bit about contamination or people not believing it's really being recycled. There are definitely ways to build that trust. I mean, the transparency point that you made, Jeff, is critical. We have some researchers at OSU who are behavioral psychologists, and they've actually researched what are the different ways that we might motivate people to increase recycling. And one of the things they also found was kind of this idea of empowerment, that if you gave people a choice, okay, I'm going to recycle my bottle, is it going to be made into another bottle, or maybe it's going to go and be made into a park bench, and I get to decide by putting it here or there. And I don't know if your system allows for that kind of choice, but there was kind of a hypothetical choice experiment they were running, and they found that actually really empowered people, particularly people who were kind of at the lower end of wanting to recycle. And that really made them feel more trusted and empowered.
I would love to get your perspective, Tia, that grassroots building. Yep, building
Okay.
trust.
So for Compost Clubhouse, a big, I think, cheerleading moment we just had is we've just now releasing our first annual report. When I got into the industry, one of my biggest concern is, what am I doing this for? Like, why? What's my why beyond being able to act as a hauler? There has to be some kind of mission or drive behind it. I work with Dominique from Greenscope Consulting, and her and I have kind of been holding hands through this process. And what she's allowed me to do is collect the data to tell the story. Right? It's one thing for me to go to our customer and says, yeah, we're taking this material and we're doing this. But then I can go to this customer and say, this is what you actually did. This is what we did together, and be able to give those brownie points to one another to say, you know what, we're in this together. This is a very grassroots movement. And then for you to participate in composting right now, you really want to do it. Like, you are a brand advocate. So for us, it's really being able to capture the data, tell the story, and be able to share that with our customers so that we can keep the momentum going.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We have about 60 seconds left for one final question. I'm sorry to the folks who are submitting questions from the live stream. We're getting quite a few, but we're going to run out of time. But Jody Shenny asks, are there plans to expand curbside recycling in Columbus?
So we just expanded curbside recycling to every week recycling 6 months ago. So if you lived in the city of Columbus previous to 6 months ago, you had a 64-gallon cart that was picked up every other week. Currently today, you have that same 64-gallon cart, but it's being picked up every single week. So there was a concern with the city and with us that on day 8, 9, and 10 of that 2-week cycle, recycling was going into the trash. So, which people run out of space, right? People run out of space, so they put it in the trash. So every week recycling, we believe, has fixed that. We've actually seen an 18 to 20% increase in recycling in the city of Columbus by going every week recycling.
Sweet. So everyone, I wish that we had more time. I'm getting the wrap it up signal, so I'm going to go ahead and turn over our conversation to Matt.
Thank you, Trace, and thank you all for being here again. I hope you found today's forum not just enlightening, but also hopefully gets you to really think about what we do and where we throw it away and where we recycle it, where it all goes, and how we can really make this world a better place. And thank you all so much for your insight and your expertise in this whole thing. I came in here completely kind of like I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I feel like I'm leaving with some knowledge now, and I appreciate that. So thank you. And thank you again to the sponsors of today's forums. I want to give them another recognition: Advanced Drainage Systems, GBQ, the Grange Insurance Audubon Center, Rumpke Waste and Recycling, Swaco, and the presenting sponsor of our live stream, once again, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation. And also to the thank you to the presenting sponsor. I already said that one. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers: Scott Barber, Elena Irwin, Tia Johnson, Jeff Snyder, and our host, Trace Carter. One more round of applause for them for taking the time for that. And I know what you're thinking. Well, I had so much fun today. I want to come next week. Well, you should. And the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that. Next week's going to be a very special one, though. We have our next Wednesday forum. It's the State of the State with Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. So I don't even know if it's sold out yet, but if it isn't, you're going to want to get that soon. Scan the QR code at your table. You can please share your thoughts about today's forum with us. And if you can't make it next week, make it to another one. Thank you so much. Enjoy the beautiful day today, and we'll see you at a forum very soon.